Why are developmental stages so important? So, one of the great parts about being a physician is we get to learn lots of theories. And so, just like our psychology counterparts, just like our education counterparts, like teachers and principals, we learn a lot of theory and kind of pedagogy and all this kind of stuff, all these big words that I can barely remember what they mean. But essentially, you learn the thinking about how we came up with different concepts. And when it comes to development, so that term means when a creature or when a species kind of changes in over time. Ideally, they mature over time, and for human beings, we do. So we start off as newborns, not knowing anything, with really big heads and lots of neural connections, and we just kind of sit around and eat all day. And then it stretches all the way to the full life, whatever that means. It could be 60s, 70s, 80s, depending on how long the lifespan is for that particular person. But there are these signposts and these checkposts, checkposts, right? Signposts throughout life that help us figure out kind of there are certain things you're supposed to accomplish or not supposed to. Let me take a step back. There are certain things that ideally happen at certain times. And as physicians and as philosophers and scientists, we've noticed that there's certain things that tend to happen at certain times. And so we group those together and we say, hey, those are some developmental milestones that you're supposed to be exhibiting, showing, living, so that we can compare you to other people your age. Okay, so those are like that's life development, and those are like developmental milestones. That's the concept. And so we are really good at knowing the developmental milestones for like birth to 2. And so if you ever talk to a pediatrician, we know we know real fast what's happening. So I trained as a pediatrician. I don't practice pediatrics anymore because of all different kinds of reasons. But like from birth to 2 weeks, you're supposed to be doing a certain thing, growing a certain amount, sleeping a certain amount. We know it pretty well. And then from like 2 weeks to a month, we know what you're supposed to do. From 1 month to 2 months, we know what you're supposed to do. And at 2 months, that's when you get your first round of shots. There's certain reflexes that are happening for kiddos. So a reflex is something that happens to without thinking about it. So like the knee reflex, if you tap your knee or that sort of thing, and your knee moves without you doing anything, that's called a reflex. Well, babies have lots of reflexes that are unique just to them. One of my favorite is the startle reflex, the Moro reflex. The startle reflex. And it's a particular maneuver, but the kids kind of do this with their hands. So it's kind of, it doesn't hurt them. I'm not in the business of hurting kids, but it's really funny to look at. So they'll do reflexes. There are certain reflexes that happen in 2 months, and there's certain reflexes that happen in 4 months, and certain things they're supposed to be doing. And then each grouping of months, there are other things that happen. So 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. Somewhere in there, they're supposed to be sitting up. Somewhere in there, they're supposed to be walking. Somewhere in there, they'll start talking and potty training. And as they keep making these milestones, we can say, as physicians, oh, they're meeting their milestones. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Well, in the world of psychiatry, it's very rare that we get involved with kiddos before like 3, before they can like talk and run around and throw fits. And so most times, once we get the kid 3, 4, 5, and 6, we will compare them to the milestones of that age group. And that includes being able to kind of self-soothe. That includes being able to potty train, to keep their hands and feet to themselves, to be able to share at a certain age, to be able to talk and communicate. And all of these things, we have big books and we have big guidelines of where kids are supposed to fall. And if for some reason a kiddo isn't falling where we expect them to, we can jump in and do stuff. We can do early childhood interventions. We can do teaching and tutoring. We can do physical therapy, occupational therapy. There's all sorts of stuff that we can do. And so that same idea for that age group continues your whole entire life. And this is where I think we as mental health professionals, we do a bad job of explaining this kind of stuff. Because most times you don't go to the doctor anymore. So the birth to like 5 is the realm of the pediatrician. So you'll see the pediatrician for everything, and they'll walk you through developmentally where you're supposed to be and how big you are, and they plot you, and you see it all on paper, and it's all awesome because it's all physical attributes. You're like, oh my God, this is so great. I get to watch a kid grow. Well, past 5 and on through the rest of your life, there are other psychological and mental milestones that you're accomplishing. But since there's no physical representation of it, I think people forget that they happen. One big milestone is dropping your kid off at kindergarten and them being able to separate from you without much ado. Some kids have a very difficult time with that, and they scream and they cry all day, and other kids are like, deuces, see ya. And and again, it's not necessarily pathological. It's not necessarily something is wrong. Is we take it all in context. We take the family dynamic, so the relationship between kids and their parents and how they relate to each other. We take it all in context to be able to say, hey, you're meeting your milestone or you're not. As you go through, so latency age kids, like so 5 to 12-ish, so pre-puberty, they have a certain expectation for how they behave, how they make friends, what type of friends they're making. Are they of the same gender, the opposite gender? Are they outgoing or not? How do they see the world? Because most times they're very concrete, meaning, if I said, don't cry over spilled milk, they'd go, wait, there's milk spilled? I don't understand. What are you talking about? Right? They don't abstract as well as older kids do. And so that age kids, that group of kids from like 5 to 11, 12, they're their own group. And then once you hit puberty, all bets are off. Puberty changes everything. The kids start to get a much bigger worldview, and then the developmental expectations change because their bodies are changing. And so they tend to, as teenagers, they tend to feel things very intensely. It's, everything is like the best thing in the world or it's the worst thing in the world, and things aren't going to get any better ever. It's intense relationships where they really kind of bring people, their peers in close, and they think everybody else outside of that peer group couldn't possibly understand anything that they're going through. And it's very kind of inward focused. And again, that's all normal. Now, and I try not to use normal, but it's very typical for that age group. And then once you get into college, that's a whole, once you graduate and become an adult, and whether you go to college or not, there should be a pivot that starts to happen with your sense of self, because your worldview expands exponentially, and there's certain milestones, and these include cultural milestones that we kind of incorporate. So this is like being out on your own, supporting yourself, being able to be in a relationship, a meaningful relationship that is safe and supportive. It's not always mature, which is why, I think it's great if you find the love of your life at 18 or 19. That's awesome. But it's not necessarily culturally expected of you to do so, right? So all these things, you take them into context, getting a job, being able to support yourself, living on your own, having a car, paying your bills on time, keeping your hygiene up, all of these milestones that, even though they're not explicit, like nobody's sitting there going, all righty, you're 23 and you should be doing these things. They're kind of implied because of the way that we set our society up. And other societies sometimes will do it differently, but all those milestones are still milestones. And depending on your theorist, because there's lots of theorists, there's Erikson, if you want to look him up, Erikson, Erikson's theory of development. There's Piaget, Piaget, and his theory. And there's lots of folks who have theories of human development that are out there. As you go through different developmental stages, the goal is to accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish during that time period. And the theory says that if you don't accomplish a certain thing during that time period, you stay stuck there. I don't know that I always believe that, but it's a nice theory. Sometimes when I'm working with folks, I go, I can see where you didn't accomplish what you needed to accomplish when you were 8 or 9. And that's still haunting you even as a 35-year-old. So let's kind of work through that. Or, hey, you had a really traumatic event happened when you were younger, I can see where you have difficulty trusting people. And that's going to make it very hard when you're 18 and in a relationship to really open up. So, again, these are all theories. A theory is not like super proven because we're all humans and things show up in us in kind of unusual ways. And so, these are kind of ideas that we use to tie us all together, but it's not a hard and fast rule. But the idea, the general goal is that as you go through different time periods, 40s, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, each little group of 10 has different expectations and kind of different social goals, all the way clear up until however old you are. And so, development is fascinating, and it is always evolving. And one of the reasons why it's just so important is so that we get a good feel for your potential. We want you to live your best life as psychiatrists. We want you to live your best life as human beings. And if you feel like you're suffering, it's convenient to have someone to compare you to. And again, that's where these age brackets come into play. So again, it's not hard and fast. I don't want people to leave feeling like they're doing something wrong. It's more of a way to kind of express the human experience. And so, so I love talking development. And that's one of the reasons why we as mental health clinicians, we feel that development is so important. And we hope that you learn something awesome from all of that. So hooray.